Hello, and thank you for joining us. In this presentation, we're going to be talking about the Infortrend RAID technology comparing to software RAID. We will introduce the RAID concept, explaining what hardware and software-based RAID is, and comparing between these two. Then introduce the advantages and the strengths that Infortrend RAID technology can provide based on the hardware-based RAID architecture to give better user experience. Finally, give couple benchmark test result and summary. Now, let's start talking about RAID. RAID is composed by more than one hard disk drive, and these hard disk drives are grouped together, makes it a RAID group. In RAID, data is distributed and stored on each hard disk drive. In such many hard disk drives and data together, hard disk drive may fail. However, such disk drive failure should not cause immediate data loss. Therefore, we understand that in RAID, it provides fault tolerance for higher data security. Other than protection to data, with many disks together, the performance and the availability is also improved, needless to mention the capacity. However, RAID usually require additional computing power to support, so they can maintain the stability. Let's have an example. Imagine many people work together must be more efficient comparing to only one person doing the same thing. However, an additional good management is required in order to keep this many people organized and reaches its expected performance. With the basic knowledge of RAID, let's introduce two types of RAID: the hardware-based RAID and the software-based RAID. First, let's talk about the hardware-based RAID. By reading the term hardware-based RAID, we know that there is a hardware involved to support the RAID operation. This hardware is usually called RAID controller, and a dedicated microchip in the controller is doing the checksum and other RAID-related calculations. This makes the RAID independent of the operating system. With the dedicated hardware RAID design, dedicated computing power also does not consume too much I/O bus resource. Thus, hardware-based RAID can have better performance and stability. Another characteristics of hardware-based RAID is that different OS can access the RAID. That means different OS may be able to mount the RAID and start accessing the data, which can be pretty flexible. In order to help you understand hardware-based RAID better, let's use another example to describe. Imagine that our personal computer, if we were playing high-resolution application or video game, we might need to install additional graphic card. Otherwise, the display quality might not be good. In this example, the additional graphic card is just like the additional hardware RAID controller to give additional dedicated computing power and provide better user experience. As for software-based RAID, unlike hardware-based RAID, software-based RAID implementations are provided by many modern operating systems. The OS software provides the RAID features running on the system CPU, sharing the computing power and I/O bus resource with the operating system. Thus, the RAID performance will depend on the server load. Also, due to computing power is shared from CPU to manage the RAID, performance will not be as good as hardware RAID. Especially, performance impact can become obvious when there are more disks or higher RAID level. For example, RAID 5 or RAID 6. Let's use the same graphic card example to explain software-based RAID. That without additional graphic card, our computer might not be able to play good video quality. The delay may happen when playing high-resolution applications or video game, because everything is relying on the limited OS and CPU computing power. With the basic knowledge of hardware and software-based RAID, let's take a look at the differences in the architecture between these two. As we can see here, we use Infortrend GSE Pro hardware-based RAID architecture as the example shown on the left, and the standard x86 software-based RAID architecture on the right. In Infortrend GSE Pro hardware-based RAID architecture, the blue portion representing the Infortrend RAID technology based on the Hardwre RAID architecture. This portion is an independent unit dedicated for SAN application, which has less direct resource impact from CPU and the OS. As for standard x86 software-based RAID architecture, the RAID is virtualized by OS, which also include the file system and file or block level application. This architecture is simple compared to hardware-based RAID. However, all operations are relying on CPU and I/O bus resource. Therefore, comparing these two, hardware-based RAID not only provides the standard CPU computing power, but also extra hardware RAID controllers computing power. Thus, it is easier to understand that based on these differences, hardware-based RAID can have dedicated resource to support its performance and stability during high system loading. Other than that, differences in architecture, what else can be different in application? Here, let's take a look at this hardware-based RAID and software-based RAID comparison table. Let's start from disk scalability. Software-based RAID has good disk scalability. However, when there are more than 100 disks, hardware-based RAID usually has stable linear increasing in performance. Thus, when comparing between performance, as we have mentioned, hardware-based RAID does not have too much performance impact along with disk increasing. But software RAID performance may be affected by OS and CPU resource issue. We will introduce more detail about linear performance increasing in later slide. Next, let's talk about the stability. Since hardware RAID has a dedicated resource to support the RAID operation, hardware RAID has better stability when there are more disks or busier system loading. However, since hardware RAID requires an extra hardware design, the cost, of course, is higher comparing to software RAID. Except the above general characteristics, hardware RAID has an additional advantage, which is block data protection, so-called intelligent drive recovery, as known as IDR. We will introduce more detail about IDR in the later slide. This IDR function does not support by software RAID, but hardware RAID. Now we should have learned about RAID and the differences between hardware and software-based RAID. Let's move on with this concept. We will introduce the advantage of Infortrend drive handling ability and RAID technology based on the hardware RAID architecture. Infortrend specialized in RAID technology for many years already and is well experienced and mature. Based on hardware RAID, which already is a very good RAID foundation, it gives good and stable performance and is already an enterprise-ready feature. Infortrend, as a RAID expert, utilizes the good hardware RAID foundation to implement firmware and CPU resource, which efficiently boosts storage performance with good stability, as well as provide disk error handling to ensure data safety, even power saving. This has been a primary focus that we have been working on. Let's take a look at Infortrend's major RAID technology highlights. First technology is the focus to reliability and continuous availability. We call it IDR, the Intelligent Drive Recovery. This primary goal of IDR technology is to prevent corruption and RAID rebuild. In RAID, as we have mentioned in the beginning, may have disk failure, which can affect the production or even data integrity. Moreover, when the failed disk has been replaced, RAID starts to rebuild. These two conditions impact the production. Thus, based on IDR, we want to further introduce two functions highlight. Here is the SMART, which most of people may have been familiar with. It is a disk drives function which does self-monitoring, analysis, and reporting. How Infortrend RAID technology take advantage of SMART? By receiving the SMART event, Infortrend RAID technology starts the handling process in the first place. To be more specific, our mechanism triggers clone and replace after smart event has been received. Without this clone replace mechanism advantage, one drive fail makes the RAID start rebuild, which impacts the performance. With clone and replace, it automatically starts the clone and replace process and clone the data to an available spare drive, then replace the failed one. Instead of rebuild, clone and replace consume less system resource and impact less of the performance. This action can start actively in hardware-based RAID, unlike software-based RAID, which passively starts the error handling process when actual data accesses the problematic block on the disk drive. That is one of the Infortrend RAID technology based on SMART. The other one is media scan. Likewise, media scan can be actively engaged by Infortrend RAID technology based on Hardwre RAID, or by set the media scan schedule. The purpose of media scan is to verify written data on drives to avoid bad blocks from causing data inconsistency in advance, instead of until the drive fails. Besides, Infortrend RAID technology allows the media scan to automatically adjust its priority depends on the system loading. If system is busy, media scan task goes to background using minimum system resource. If system is idle, media scan task goes full speed. This automatically media scan priority adjustment ensures the best user experience by not disrupting the production. Therefore, Infortrend focuses on IDR to ensure reliability and continuous availability. Besides SMART and media scan, we would like to introduce another mechanism called response timeout checking. As there are multiple disk drives in RAID and I/O continuous, each disk drive must respond to I/O requests immediately in order to avoid latency. So we implement a response timeout checking mechanism that when latency occurs, Infortrend storage system uses parodies to compute the needed data instead of waiting for the delayed I/O. We're very experienced at this drive error handling, especially when dealing with unstable disk drive, which is sometimes good but sometimes bad. Therefore, again, when talking about data protection, SMART, media scan, and this response timeout checking mechanism are our Infortrend RAID technology's primary focuses. These functions are also the benefits from hardware-based RAID. Other than data protection, we also provide additional functions, which is the power saving. Infortrend provides two power saving modes. In level 1 mode, drives turn into idle mode with lower spin speed. In level 2 mode, drives spin off to save more power consumption. In level 2 mode, it can even save almost 50% of system power consumption. This power saving design is a very good function highlight for users whose concern is the energy saving. By far, with Infortrend RAID technology based on Hardwre RAID, Infortrend already provides small-medium business product with enterprise technology. Next, let's talk about performance. First, in performance, we would like to introduce the Infortrend read-ahead technology. In this read-ahead mechanism, our goal is to let system detect I/O pattern. When I/O pattern is sequential, read-ahead mechanism pre-read the next upcoming I/O, so the response time will be shorter. In our test, read-ahead mechanism even has about 30% improvement in read throughput. The read-ahead concept can be similar to our daily life when planning your to-do list. If you already know what to do next, do it in advance must be efficient instead of just wait. This example should help you understand read-ahead easier. This read-ahead mechanism benefits media entertainment or video streaming applications the most. If there are media entertainment or video streaming customers, this function is very good to highlight. Next, in performance and stability, we have mentioned earlier, the hardware-based RAID performance can have linear increasing. and will not drop along with more number of disk drives. Let's use this slide to explain. As we all know that different type of disk drives such as SATA, SAS, or SSD can have different performance. Of course, each disk drive type has its performance limit. Infortrend RAID technology has successfully implemented to ensure that along with increasing of disk drives, performance has a linear increasing and stable when it reaches the system performance limit, as shown in the right graphic. This again explains that Infortrend RAID technology plus the advantage of hardware-based RAID can provide good and stable performance, which is very important for all kinds of application. If performance is more important, hardware RAID, of course, is the better choice. Now, that's disks, and let's take a look at a real application test. This application is called AJA, which is a benchmark tool to test performance and stability in media entertainment application. We use Infortrend GSE Pro to test, and the test result shows that it has very stable performance without much drop or unstable peaks, as shown in the AJA screenshot. This test proves that Infortrend GSE Pro can also perform pretty well in media entertainment or video streaming application, which is able to satisfy users' need in performance and stability. Now we have introduced performance. Let's move on and talk about scalability. In scalability, Infortrend RAID technology is also very outstanding to provide stable and large space. That is, a single Infortrend system can support up to 856 disk drives. If each disk drive has 10 terabytes, it creates almost 8 petabyte usable space with good performance and stability. This is good for filing, backup, and surveillance application, which needs large space with stable performance, and is something that software-based RAID cannot achieve. When system reaches this many disk drives and high system loading, software-based RAID might not perform as good as hardware RAID. Scalability is another Infortrend's primary focus and strength. At this point, let's summarize that we have introduced RAID, hardware or software-based RAID, Infortrend RAID technology in data protection, performance, scalability, and other functions, which can fulfill many applications. If we think about enterprise RAID, it requires performance, stability, data safety, and no downtime. With Infortrend RAID technology, it provides good performance and stability. With Infortrend GSE Pro, its drive handling ability will protect data. Therefore, by moving from software RAID to Infortrend RAID technology, it provides your small-medium business customer an enterprise-level storage, and is a great benefit. At last, we want to introduce 2 more additional tables to give you extra understanding of Infortrend's strength. In one of our ongoing benchmark tests, here comes the Milestone certification, which is pretty famous in surveillance industry. We use GSE Pro for this Milestone test, and we'd like to show you how good Infortrend GSE Pro can perform. Based on the same condition of 1080 pixel resolution, Infortrend GSE Pro can support 1000 cameras, while competitor can support only 200. This is a significant gap. Let's further take a look at read latency. Infortrend GSE Pro has only 1.74 millisecond, while competitor has 37.91 millisecond, which is very high. Then in individual video stream size, we use 0.52 to test Infortrend GSE Pro, while competitor uses 0.51. This means that the test file size is larger in Infortrend GSE Pro's test, but Infortrend GSE Pro still can achieve 1000 cameras. This is a very good example to explain the differences in performance between hardware and software-based RAID. At the same time, this test proves that Infortrend GSE Pro can perform pretty well in surveillance application. Let's introduce the last but not least example about the advantage of hardware-based RAID. Here, we comparing between FiberSAN and IPSAN. All Infortrend storage support FiberSAN solution to provide enterprise-level storage. What are the FiberSAN advantage over IPSAN? FiberSAN uses Fiber Channel Protocol, while IPSAN uses TCP/IP protocol. As FiberSAN also has its own additional hardware to support its operation, it offloads processing from CPU, while IPSAN rely on CPU and may be affected. Therefore, when further talking about performance, since IPSAN may be affected by CPU or bandwidth factors, Fiber Channel SAN are generally has better performance than iSCSI SANs. Also, Fiber Channel networks are relatively small and isolated networks when compared to TCP/IP. So, FiberSAN is generally more reliable and stable than IPSAN. With hardware design RAID architecture which also supports FiberSAN, Infortrend RAID technology offers additional stable and high-performance network solution comparing to software-based RAID. Hopefully, this presentation has given a better understanding about hardware, software-based RAID, as well as Infortrend RAID technology. Based on hardware RAID architecture, Infortrend shall offer an additional market other than software RAID to fulfill more application and make successful stories. It is the end of this presentation, and thank you for joining us.